Okay, good evening, ladies. This is, as you may know, this is your last Ag-cademy session, and the host for today is Miss Shauna Brandon. Miss Brandon is from Mitchell, and she will be touching on the top. She will be hosting the session and also providing you with education and knowledge on the topic of agro-tourism. So please be mindful of the housekeeping matters. Please mute your mics and stop your videos from appearing on the screen while she's presenting. You can utilize the raising hand reaction to the bottom of your Zoom screen when you would like to ask a question or have any inputs. Thank you very much, and please enjoy the session, and thank you for attending. Miss Brandon, I am just testing to see if you're able to hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so you have the floor now, the virtual floor, and all the best with your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can proceed to share screen.
Okay, so by the way, my name is Miss Tara Lafos, and I'm the executive assistant of Helen's Daughters.
Tara LaForce.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Miss LaForce.
You're welcome. So I have host rights as well, and I will also be moderating the room for you, helping you with any technical issues or matters.
Okay, okay.
Yes. Yeah, so you can go ahead now to start your presentation. Thank you very much.
So I can just share screen.
Yes, you can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'll just bring up my presentation and then I'll introduce myself.
Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just have to check something. If you can just give me a second, I'm just trying to sort out something with my presentation.
Okay, Miss Brandon, noted. Thank you.
Okay, give me 1 second. Oh boy. Okay, hello everyone. Sorry for the delay a while ago. I had a slight challenge with my presentation, but I think I am okay now. I would just like to briefly introduce myself. I am Shauna Brandon, Rural Development Specialist at the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture. Um, I have been working in the area of rural tourism for several years now. I have been attending training sessions on agritourism and rural tourism, and I have worked particularly in Jamaica with communities on how to establish rural tourism activities. So let's start. I am very pleased to be invited to present as part of your Ag-cademy, right? And so today we will be doing an introduction to rural tourism. Okay, so the presentation outline for today, we will be looking at what is agritourism, what are some of the potential benefits of agritourism linkages, improving supply of local agricultural products to the tourism sector, and then we'll be drilling down a little bit into bringing tourism into rural areas and farming local, well, improving the supply of local agricultural products to the tourism sector, and then next, bringing tourism to rural areas. And then we look at trends towards alternatives to traditional tourism and how you can use your farm or rural community as a tourism destination. Tips on developing and executing your idea, and then finally closing with agritourism examples. So what is agritourism? ECA sees agritourism as a promotion of increased linkages between agriculture and tourism. So agriculture really is our core business, but tourism we recognize as the dominant industry in the Caribbean. And so we see that tourism provides, sorry, let me go back. We see that tourism sector provides significant market opportunities for the agricultural sector and for rural communities. And this can comprise the supply of local agricultural, local products to the tourism sector and or taking tourism into rural areas. And so tourism, as you may already realize, particularly being in the Caribbean, is big business. According to the World Tourism Organization, tourism contributes 10% of GDP, that is world GDP, and generates 1 in 10 jobs. It accounts for 7% of exports, 7% of exports globally. And so if you go on the United Nations World Tourism Organization site, that is UNWTO, they have what they kind of call a barometer, which has various statistics on international tourism, right? So you can see the scale of tourism internationally. And so this is a quote from the United Nations World Tourism Organization. Today, the business volume of tourism equals or even surpasses that of oil, exports, food products, or automobiles. Okay, so, and particularly in the Caribbean, you will realize that tourism is very important to Caribbean countries. For several Caribbean countries, tourism earnings account for more than 60% of their GDP. And if you look at the bar chart to our right, I'm not sure how clearly you're able to see, but the countries to the left that have the highest bars are mostly Caribbean countries. So in terms of tourism dependence, that bar chart shows the tourism dependency index, and several of the most tourism dependent countries are in the Caribbean. So you see, starting with from the left, Aruba, then 4th Antigua and Barbuda, 5th Bahamas, 6th St. Lucia, 9th Dominica, 11th Grenada, 14th Barbados, 15th St. Vincent and the Grenadines, 16th St. Kitts and Nevis, 17th Jamaica, 18th Belize, and it continues. So you can see the extent to which tourism is a dominant industry in the Caribbean. Unfortunately, though, at the same time, even though tourism is so dominant, we have what we refer to as tourism revenue leakages of up to 70% in some countries, which means that for every dollar that is earned from a tourist, you have up to 7 cents out of that dollar leaving the countries, okay? So only 3 cents of that dollar in some countries are retained. So that's a very high rate of leakages, and it is because that so much of the tourism in the Caribbean is dependent on external inputs, right? Whether it be imported goods, whether the hotels being managed external to the country, air travel being external to the country, etc. So there is a high level of leakage, of revenue leakage. And in comparison to what has happened with the tourism, because we're just talking about the boom that we have seen in the tourism industry, agriculture has not boomed to the extent that tourism has boomed. So agriculture development in the Caribbean has not kept pace with tourism for several reasons. For example, the sector's exposure to external shocks, such as hurricanes, reduced commodity prices, increased international competition. There's this dependence on a few main export crops in a lot of Caribbean countries. And then those export crops have faced various challenges on the international market, and they have lost competitiveness. There's also limited access to financial resources to scale and modernize production. And then there's a fragmentation of agricultural stakeholders. You have a lot of small farmers that are spread out, that are not well organized. And so they can't negotiate as a group as well. And so their negotiating power is relatively weak. And then, of course, as all of this has led to increased food imports. So that is why organizations like ECA have tried to promote the strengthening of linkages between agriculture and tourism, because we see that there can be several benefits from strengthening these linkages. So to name a few, for one, expanding the sale of agricultural commodities. If we had stronger linkages between, for example, the agricultural sector and the hotel sector, you would have a greater market for agricultural produce. More local produce could be flowing into the hotel sectors. You'd also, based on various agritourism activities, you'd be able to diversify farm income, right? Because you have other types of activities that the farm could be involved in. This in turn would create jobs, particularly for youth and women. So oftentimes, in terms of tours in rural areas, youth tend to be involved. Women benefit because particularly from the sale of craft items, artisanal products, your agro-processed products to visitors and tourists, that is a benefit particularly for women and for youth. And then tourism, stronger agritourism linkage also foster opportunities to add value to local produce. So if, for example, you are selling pineapples, possibly you can think of a lot of other value-added products that can come from the pineapple that would be of interest to visitors. And then, agritourism linkages allows for you to foster community collaboration, because it will require community collaboration and partnership. Rural tourism in particular helps to revalue the rural way of life, because oftentimes when visitors come into the rural areas and they express their interest in what they're seeing, and it's things that oftentimes person in rural areas take for granted, but the person coming from outside sees it in a different light, and so it revalues the things that rural residents take for granted. And this in turn can help to build local pride. For many, many years and decades, we have tended to have a rural to urban drift. If you now have resources or visitors or tourism pouring into the rural areas, it helps to increase your pride in your own, right? And ultimately for the tourist industry, you strengthen the tourist offer. You add another dimension to the tourism offered by your country by adding these rural tourism elements. Okay, so I am going to move on to the area, because one of the things with agritourism, we see it in two ways. The supply of local products, local produce to the tourist sector, as well as bringing tourism into the rural area. So I'm gonna quite quickly look a little bit on what it takes to increase local supply to the tourism market. This won't necessarily be the focus of the presentation. And the reason why I spent a little time here, because it has been a cry from several corners that there's not enough local food in our hotel sector, right? And there are various challenges. So for example, there is issues with the hotels have said that there's not enough. Sometimes there's issues with quality and consistency of supply. And we know that there are supply chain logistics in terms of storage, transportation, amalgamation of produce to get into the hotel sector. There tends to be a propensity of the hotels to import rather than sometimes to look locally. So there are all of these challenges sometimes that prevent, and sometimes just lack of knowledge between the two sectors. A lot of times also we realize, and we're increasingly realizing this, that tourism and agriculture speak almost two different languages, right? the tourism or the hotel sector, they expect that they will have year-round produce they will have year-round produce, year-round access to produce. But at the same time, from the agricultural sector, we have to contend with seasonality, that you may not have certain products available at certain times of the year, right? Even though this is expectation from the hotel sector. Also, we have to recognize that the tourism sector has changed, that what would have been a large hotel, say 20 years ago, is not a large hotel anymore. The hotels are getting larger and larger and larger, and increasingly they are part of international change and which have international sourcing and supply systems. And so they operate and they think differently from the agricultural sector. And oftentimes, as I've mentioned before, the agricultural sector is somewhat fragmented. It's not as cohesive and as coordinated, because you do need a cohesive agricultural sector to try and come to the table with hotel sector, particularly those that are internationally owned. And so how do we get past these hurdles, right? How do we increase the supply of local produce to the hotel sector? First, I think one of the things that we have promoted is dialogue. There has to be increased communication between hotel sector and the agricultural sector. Communicate with hotels to find out what their product needs are, what are the quality specifications that they require for the produce that they wish to buy, understand the seasonality of the hotel sector so that planting and can be scheduled accordingly, right? Similarly, the hotel sector needs to understand the seasonality in the agricultural sector. They need to know what is available when, right? Some hotels are may be willing to adjust their menus in line with seasonality. So you might have different menus for different times of the year based on what is available, but you can only do that if you have that information, right? So there has to be a sharing of information on both sides. There's a need to sensitize chefs with respect to serving local dishes, using fresh local food, as I mentioned, understanding agricultural seasonality. And there's also need for government support, right? The farmers alone can't do it alone. They need what we refer to as the backative or the support from the government. Government needs to kind of play a role in tempering the expectations of the hotel sector to say, no, you can't import X when that is already available from our farmers, So government has to almost play a brokering role, but the farmers and agricultural sector need to lobby the government to come onto their side with this respect. From the on-farm perspective, once you have gained information as to what the hotels want, you have to consider planting according to market need, implementing agronomic practices that enhance your chances for good post-harvest quality, whether it is pest and disease management, sufficient watering, and so forth, sufficient nutrient management, ensuring proper food safety practices so that someone can come on your farm and say, no, you're not doing the right thing, therefore your food we can't guarantee that your food is safe, so it can't come into my hotel. Consider issues of traceability. Based on the needs of the hotel sector, you may need to experiment with new crops and new growing systems, right? And then moving on to post-harvest, looking at proper harvesting techniques to reduce spoilage, consider the need to aggregate small farmer output. Hotels don't necessarily want to deal with a lot of small farmers. They would rather an intermediary that is, amalgamating from small farmers. So how can that amalgamation take place? And also, we also have to consider the need for adequate storage infrastructure prior to the distribution of the product, right? A lot of these, as we move on to supply logistics, what are the appropriate distribution mechanisms, the need to have an appreciation of the hotel receival process, and then a feedback dialogue to assess satisfaction with supply. I didn't get a chance to ask at the beginning if I should take questions and answers during my presentation or afterward. Can someone clarify on that? Can anybody clarify whether or not at points I can break to take questions, or if it's only at the end of the session?
You can ask questions at any time.
Oh, as in the participants can ask questions at any time?
Yes, we can just raise our hand in the chat and then you can answer.
Okay, how will I see where hands are raised?
It normally shows at the bottom, but I guess since you're presenting, you won't see it.
Okay,
yeah,
I've just seen, yes, I see a message come up that someone has raised their hand. So she can unmute, or I have to unmute her? I see a Michaela.
It was just a demonstration.
Okay. Oh,
Yes.
of the raising hands. I see what you
Yes.
mean. Fair enough.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I see. So I know how when persons are raising their hands. Well, I mean, first, I wouldn't mind stopping here, just to find out what has been the experience. Because I know we have farmers on this session. Just to ask if any of you have had experiences trying selling to hotels or trying to sell to a hotel. Anyone? No raised hands. All right, okay, anyone can just share what they think about the process of selling to the hotel sector? No one wants to comment? All right. All right. Well, I was hoping that we could.
Can you please repeat the question, Johan?
Yes, I just wanted to find out if anyone in this session has had the experience of selling produce to the hotel sector, or if anyone has ever inquired or tried to sell, or is aware of any other associate farmer that sells to the hotel sector, or has tried to sell to the hotel sector.
Okay, well, I personally haven't, but from what I've heard, some people, the challenges they do have in terms of payment, I don't know too much about the crop production and whatnot in that area, but maybe in terms of payment.
Oh, so you have heard from persons who actually sell to the hotel sector, they have challenges getting paid.
Yes, and from one of the persons inside of the hotel, what he told me that usually they have certain farmers, like it's like a process. They have kind of like an agreement with the farmers, and if they get paid, some of them within a month, within 2 months or 3 months, they get their monies, but not right away.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, because that actually is a concern that I'm aware of. I know it happens where I am, just in Jamaica, that there is a complaint that hotels take a long time to pay. And so that also has to be something that requires some lobbying, because I think if farmers are organized, then they can make representation to say the Hotel and Tourism Association to say, this, 3 months payment period is just not acceptable, because I'm sure most times the hotels don't wait 3 months for guests to pay them. So those are some of the issues that do need to be tackled to make it more feasible for local farmers to supply to the hotel. But again, I think it's a discrepancy between power. It's a large hotel dealing with us one small farmer. But that is why there's unity and strength in unity. All right.
Could I make a comment?
Sure, please go ahead.
It's not only with farmers. When I did ecotourism, it was the same. It's part of their cash flow tactics. They, even though the guest would pay for the tour the day before they did the tour, they would take 30 to 60 days to pay me. And there were even times where we had an agreement for a 30-day payment, and I'd have to chase them up for payments. It's ridiculous. It's pretty much standard practice in most of the hotels here, regardless of what you're trading.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So has there been any kind of, I'm not sure if it's possible to have any type of government intervention in this area?
I doubt it, but especially in the slow season, you find that they take extra time to pay because they have lower rates of income. So it just helps them. I assume, I can't see any other reason why other than to manage their savings and their cash flow. But it is very taxing on the smaller person who has, usually has, if you don't have other sources of revenue, it can cripple you.
I can imagine. And I think this is part of the dialogue that needs to occur, as a group of hotels, why is this a practice? And they need to, Tracy, they as you say, they do it with a small supplier, but if you have a group of farmers, a group of tourism suppliers sitting down with hoteliers, it would be interesting to hear what they come to the table with in this regard. I see someone's hand is raised, Cheryl Lochter.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Now that this lady just raised that issue, just this week I just had this question. I wasn't sure who I should go to, but perhaps someone in the group who sells produce to the hotels would be able to answer. When when you go to the hotel and you express your interest in selling your produce to them, is there a contract that you sign that the hoteliers would state that payment would be received within 30 days or 2 months? Because I think this is the second time on the chat I've heard someone say that the hotels don't pay timely, and I know that for a fact. But I just want to know what agreement is made between the farmer and the hotelier, please. If anyone knows.
Okay, I'm waiting to see if anyone answers that question.
I don't mind having a comment. In the past, we don't have contracts with the hotels, so there's for agriculture, so there's a bit more leeway for them to dictate payment. But in tourism, because in the ecotourism, because of liability and all these other things, we did have contracts. So it was a different ballpark. But I think farmers should, if you're going to be doing something consistently, I think you should encourage to have a contract and then that stipulate your payment cycle, because then you have some policy to fall back on. But in agriculture, usually it costs more than it was worth it. So we have gotten to the point where we don't really sell to the hotels anymore. And another difficulty that I've had is that there's limited dialogue with the hotels in terms of them giving up information, even in terms of what volume of tomatoes or each commodity that you use, so that we have projections to work with and then to plan to coordinate to supply. So even in the past, where we've tried to have dialogues and say, tell us what your needs are and we can figure out what proportion of that we can supply, they're not willing to have those conversations. If it's that they don't have the information, I'm not sure, but to me, any organization with any form of books can have a good assessment of what their requirements are, depending on the trend of the season, so the peak season and the low times. And then that dialogue does not even exist between the hotels and the farmers. So it makes it even harder to, you know, be able to strategize.
And you would have noticed that. Thank you very much for that comment. And you would have noticed that dialogue was one of the first points, because it's very difficult to establish consistent supply if you do not have that dialogue, right? And that is why there is need to band together in numbers, because it's easy for hotels to tell one supplier, you know, they're not sharing information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I think if you go as a group, you know, you go with a little bit more force, and if there's this ongoing dialogue, and again, if government is involved and signals to the hotel sector, say, listen, this is where we want to go. We want to increase the supply of local produce. You know, you almost have to coerce the hotel sector. You know, one farmer by himself or herself can't do it. But there has to be a coordinated or organized way of conducting this type of dialogue, because as the participant just outlined her experience, you know, they don't want to communicate, they don't want to pay, but there, as I said, there has to be some kind of organized approach to communicating with the hotels. I see a chat where someone is asking, quick question, do we have a farmers association? So I won't be able to answer that, but I don't know, that's probably for another discussion. But generally speaking, it is something that has to be done at a broader level than one farmer speaking to a hotel. All right, if there's no other comments, if there are any other comments or questions, I can move on. And I think over time also, it has to be made clear. Someone has raised their hand. Okay, I will check. It has to be made clear to the hotel sector that ultimately it is in their interest to have this dialogue with the agricultural sector, right? They have to be able to see the win-win in sourcing locally. All right, Anna, can you speak, please?
Yes, good evening to all. So some of us met on the farm the other day, and I'm not a farmer yet. I want to retire as a farmer, but I work with hotels as a contractor. So what happens to them is, I will give you an example what happens as a contractor. Their accounts tend to be, so, and I'm not talking about the dialogue, but the payment part. Their accounts tend to be abroad, and you need to have a lot of documentation to get paid from them. So they ask you to set up an account with them. There's a lot of answers you have to be registered, you have to have a certificate, you have to have returns and stuff. So a lot of times what happens to me is they'll ask me to hire the plumber, hire the electrician, hire the welder, hire everybody under me because my company is properly registered and they're not. So a lot of the times, I mean, I would say 75% of hotels here that I work with, they would tend to go with me just because I have everything in order financially. And then we make deals. Literally, I buy TVs for them, I buy furniture.
Anna, you just muted. Could you unmute and continue?
Sorry, just got a call accidentally. But that's what I said on the payment account. So it has nothing to do with dialogue or group or whatever, but I know their accounting tends to be set up either abroad or it's on a level where I had to submit a lot of documents. It took them 4 weeks to approve me in every single hotel. And then my doors have opened for the last 5 years.
But you see, that's the thing. This agricultural sector needs to understand how the hotels operate, what is required to supply to them. And then the relevant requirements can be put in place, you know, but for those who just don't know, and again, they don't communicate it because they don't want people to know. They don't want people necessarily sometimes to have the capacity to supply to them because they want this flexibility to buy local when they want, buy overseas when they want, you know. So when things are up in the air, you know, it suits
Absolutely.
them. It suits them. But as the sector that wants to supply to them, you know, it is the onus is also on the farming community to say, all right, we need markets, we need to supply, we need to understand what's happening, you know. So, you know, as much as it is a challenge, you don't necessarily want to sit back and say, we're not gonna try, you know, because it's billions of dollars worth of market, and it is, in my mind, it is worth the try. Okay.
Another thing I would mention, hotels, their turnover and management is very high, especially ones that have international guys. They take to turn them over within a year or 2 years. So if you could starting over and over again. In my case, I can have my assistant start over, but I know when you're a farmer and you're focusing on things, it's hard to keep these contacts. And it's just like starting brand new relationship when they change the management. It's super annoying.
Okay. But this is important knowledge, and that's why one small farmer can't do it on his own, you know. You do need a level of organization to be able to go to the hotel sector and deal with those sorts of transitions and changes, etc. But as I said, there just needs to be a greater understanding of what it takes, and you need the support. You know, you do need the support from government to say to the hotels, listen, you know, this is the way we're moving forward, right? All right, let me continue. If there are no other comments or questions. Okay, sorry. Right, I had finished this slide. Okay, so when we talk about the other side of agritourism, so as I said, one route is to try and increase the flow of product into the hotel sector. The other side is actually bringing tourism into rural communities. And the World Tourism Organization describes rural tourism, or defines rural tourism, as tourist activities that are carried out in the rural area and that aim to interact with rural life, know the traditions and the way of life of the people and the attractions of the area and of the product that is offered. And so the rural tourism community, there are several elements that can make up the rural tourism offering. So starting from our top left, there's rural heritage. You have your traditional architecture, your industrial heritage, prehistoric castles or churches, villages. Moving downward, the countryside, you know, you're talking about your landscape, your mountains, your lakes, your rivers, the scenery, forests, the nature. And then moving towards to the gray box, you have rural life, your crafts, your local events, your food, your agritourism, traditional music. And then you have rural activities, farming, fishing, riding, cycling, walking, etc. So there are many elements that become resources or assets within the rural tourism community. And it's really, how do you identify what is in your community and what can translate potentially into a rural tourism offering? All right, so rural tourism, the birth of rural tourism. Rural tourism has its roots in Europe. Farmers would rent rooms in their homes, which promoted coexistence with families and their customs. And there was a focus on accommodation and exploring the countryside and small towns. So here on your right-hand side, we have a picture of a British bread and breakfast. And so this would be typical of the accommodation in rural areas. And so accommodation is a critical component of the tourism equation, right? Whereas often when you think of rural tourism, you see it maybe as just an attraction. Someone leaving the hotel, going to an attraction and going back to a hotel. But I think based on the European experience, we also need to start looking at the possibility of the accommodation being in the rural community. Maybe not necessarily for the entire stay of that visitor in that particular country, but for a part of the period. Because overnight visitors are very valuable. Surveys show that overnight visitors have higher spending levels than day visitors, upwards of almost up to 300% more than day visitors. So a lot of the tourism spend stays in the community when the visitor is staying in that community. So it is seen as an essential ingredient. All right. I just want to do a check if everyone is hearing me. I am seeing something in the chat, someone saying that they are not hearing. Can someone confirm that they're able to hear me?
I'm hearing.
Hearing
Okay.
fine.
Okay, thank you much. Thank you. All right.
I'm hearing.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So this picture shows a classic tea time at a British bread and breakfast. And if you're thinking from your point of view, you reside in a rural community and you are thinking of offering accommodation, you know, what elements can you offer that makes it unique to your country or your area? We know tea is very unique to the British. But you know, what can be unique to where you are? If you're, for example, you're in St. Lucia, you know, what part of that accommodation offering you can make it feel as, you know, that it is unique to the country where you are. So, you know, these are things to think about based on the experience elsewhere. And these are examples of a French gîte. A French gîte essentially is a rural house for rent, and it's in the country, as a house for rent in the countryside, supposedly very charming and so forth. And so in Europe, they have an association called Eurogîtes, because Europe already is the leader or global leader in the provider of rural tourism. Eurogîtes is a European rural tourism umbrella group comprising of 28 organizations from 25 countries in Europe, and they market and lobby on behalf of rural tourism operators. So you see what I mentioned about banding together, strength in numbers. Eurogîtes estimates that rural tourism supports 900,000 direct and indirect jobs in Europe and generates 150 billion euro in gross income each year. So you begin to see the possibilities of rural tourism. And if you look on the bottom left, you'll see the link to the Eurogîtes site. And if you go on the site, it has all different types of rural holidays that you can take, right? So it provides some further information as to what is possible and what is happening elsewhere in the area of rural tourism. And then now if we look at Latin America, they have developed something that has been termed agro-food routes. So agro-food routes essentially are routes that are centered around emblematic products or signature products in a particular area, right? So for example, we're looking here at a wine route in Argentina. And if you see the quote, they mentioned that wine is very similar to tourism because it relates to creating and selling pleasure. And Argentina is the largest producer of wine in South America and the 5th largest producer of wine in the world. And they are receiving a growing number of wine-related tourists. Initially, wine tourism in Argentina started as a means, again, of diversifying income for these vineyards. And over time, the income that was earned from the tourists, became significant. And it also led to an increase in product sales. So wine tourism is significant. In addition, it's a supplemental income on top of what they already earn from just selling wines. And the fact that they have invested in building hotels, accommodation, a lot of these vineyards, building restaurants, etc., because it has become so lucrative, these wine routes and wine tourism. And then there is the tequila trail in Mexico. Most of you may know that tequila is an alcoholic beverage from Mexico. And so there is what is called La Ruta del Tequila. And that route, and tequila actually is from a plant. And you can actually see that plant in the picture on your left-hand side. And that route has become so famous that it is now a UNESCO recognized World Heritage Site. And it is a road network connecting 8 towns around the tequila volcano that comprise the principal tequila production area. It has become a cultural and gastronomic destination and venue for tequila, even tequila themed festivals and events. And it has become, just the route itself is like $1 billion industry because of the amount of visitors that they are bringing in. And so, for example, this is another map, because essentially the route is mapped. They identify the different points connected to tequila that visitors may want to go to, right? There's even trains, various trains. So this one is called the Jose Cuervo Express. I've seen another one called the Tequila Express. And essentially there are various ways of doing the route. You can do the route by train, you can do the route by car, you can do the route by bike, however you want. And there's cultural, there's dancing on the trains and food, many different elements that combine to create this route. And then in Argentina again, we're back to Argentina. There is a herbal tea that the Argentinians drink. And they pretty much sip this tea from these beautiful pots and they sip it all day long. But it is so, again, it's such a signature product or so emblematic of Argentina and it's called yerba mate. And they also have created a route around this yerba mate tea. And the route comprises a variety of sites. You can visit the farms that grow the herbal tea. You can visit the processing of it. You can visit restaurants that infuse the food with the yerba mate. Many different elements as part of this route. Okay, so I'm hearing persons are saying that they're hearing. I'm happy to see that. All right. And then also in Colombia has a coffee route. It's called El Eje Cafetero. In English, the coffee axis of Colombia. And it is a route covering the main coffee growing regions. Again, this is another one that has been recognized on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Several of the coffee plantations now offer accommodation. The route offers plantation tours and other attractions and activities. So you get a sense essentially of in 2 regions of the world, that's Europe and Latin America, how rural tourism or aspects of their rural tourism in these 2 areas. Excuse me. All right, so we now move on to tourism trends. And essentially, what is occurring that is making the ability to offer rural tourism, right? Both the UN World Tourism Organization as well as a local Caribbean organization, Compete Caribbean, have identified various travel trends that make for greater interest in rural tourism. So for example, people want to travel. I have it here as travel to change, but they want to be somewhat transformed on their visit. You know, they want to have a transformative experience. It's something that takes them out of the norm of their daily lives, you know. And then there is the travel to show. You know, we're living in a world of social media, Instagram, Pinterest. You know, people want to capture the most beautiful shots, something that looks different. They want to post it immediately. You know, so something that's off the beaten track, something that's unusual. You know, something that is gonna go viral when they post it on YouTube. So, or TikTok, you know, so, you know, people are looking for these, you know, highly attractive clips or videos that they can take. You know, there is, for example, in Jamaica, it's a river attraction, but it's run by a local community. It's, you know, it's off the beaten track. It's in a deep rural area, but they have excellent ratings. And one of the things that their tour guides do, they take their phones they will take your phone and they will take the most amazing pictures and videos of you enjoying this river. And they will go into your phone and change the settings and do things with your video that you didn't even know that it could do, you know? But at the end of the day, you have the most memorable pictures and videos to show of your trip to this location. And then, of course, there's a pursuit of healthy life. That has, even if it was big before, and then after COVID, it's even bigger. Health and wellness is a big trend. People, you know, want to travel and feel like they're better off for having traveled. Again, of course, go off on the beaten track. You know, the days of sameness have kind of come to an end, particularly for younger generations. They are willing to take a little bit more risk. They're not necessarily going to go to the same beach and every year after year after year, doing the same pina colada. You know, they want to do different things. So that definitely is opening the door for options with respect to rural tourism. People want to take home memorable stories, you know, and that comes from interacting with local people. Excuse me, coming outside of the hotels. So that also, excuse me, endears people to get it going off the beaten track. Excuse me. Sorry. And then they want to actively participate. They want to be immersed in an experience. They don't just want to stand on the sidelines and observe, you know? They want something that they are involved in. And then of course, with all of these new trends, people still want to be comfortable and they still want to be safe, right? So it's how do you combine all of these elements, but still keep that tourist or that visitor comfortable and safe. And the concept of agritourism is not really that new, right? We recently made a presentation to an international conference on the 16th staging of World Agritourism Day. So this is something that has been going on for over a decade at the very least. And so you see that, you know, there have been these discussions. This conference is actually emanating out of India, right? And the organizers, they had part of their their outline on the purpose and the goals of the conference, you know, they have this quote: when the primary sector contributes the least to our GDP and the tertiary sector the most, why not combine the best of both to ensure inclusive growth? And by the primary sector, we're talking about the agricultural sector, and by the tertiary sector, we're talking about tourism. And so as we had mentioned previously with respect to Caribbean agriculture and Caribbean tourism, it's happening across the world that increasingly the agricultural sector has contributed less and less and less to gross domestic product, GDP, and increasingly servicing industries such as tourism are contributing even more and more and more. And so there has to be that connection between the two so that you have, as is mentioned in this quote, inclusive growth. And there actually is a agritourism, an international agritourism network. Possibly if after the presentation, I can find that link and I can share it with the Helen's daughters so that they can circulate it to the group, so that if they're interested in finding out more about what is happening internationally with agritourism, they can check out that site as well. But just to say that, and I want to say the conference brought presenters from all across the world. So this is a phenomenon across the world. It's just that in the Caribbean, we have been focusing on a certain type of tourism. As a lot of you will know, it's largely a sun, sand, and sea. And so, you know, I think we're a little bit slow in coming to terms with the myriad of options when it comes to rural tourism and agritourism. And so the next point I want to make is, how do you get into this? How do you even start the process? You may have a farm, you're in a rural area. You know, what are some of the ways in which you can create this rural tourism or farm tourism attraction? I don't know if anybody at this point would like to have a question or a comment. No questions or comments as yet at this point? Okay, fine. All right, so I will continue. So there are some elements that I have here listed that we'll just touch on a little bit. Attractions, accommodation, culinary or gastronomy, health and wellness, or being part of a route. And essentially, agritourism is more than just say you're inviting people to come to your farm, right? It takes a lot of creativity to turn a farm into a successful tourism enterprise or rural tourism enterprise. A lot of thought has to go into how do you create you know, that sense of attraction, that level of visitor appeal, that people will want to come to your farm or other type of rural location, you know, as part of, you know, their tourism experience, right? So I'm actually going to play a video. I'm probably gonna have to stop sharing screen so that I can show the video. You just bear with me a little bit. I'll stop share and then I'll share the video.
If this looks more like a tool shed or a farm than a hotel, well, that's...
All right, can someone ensure that you're seeing the video and you're hearing the video? I just want to confirm that you're able to see and hear the video based on what I just played.
I was,
Yes.
Yes, yes?
I didn't hear it, huh? I can see,
Yeah.
but I can't hear.
You
Yeah,
can
he was
see.
speaking.
Okay, one or two persons heard it. All right,
Didn't-
I am going to.
Didn't hear it.
You didn't hear it.
Nope.
All right, I'm gonna play it again and do a sound check again. Let me start from the beginning.
If this looks more like a tool shed or a farm than a hotel, well, that's because it
It's
is.
playing just low.
Here near Greeley.
Okay, it's low. Okay, thank you. Let me correct that. All right, I hope it will be better now. I'm gonna play again.
If this looks more like a tool shed or a farm than a hotel, well, that's because it is. The Platte River Fort here near Greeley is an agro-tourism location. That means it's a working farm, and people can also come stay here and learn more about what farm life is like, all without losing those five-star accommodations. Welcome to a place where the longhorn cattle often outnumber the guests,
He's super, super sweet.
where the rooms move locations with the seasons,
This is a Conestoga wagon.
and life on the farm meets fine dining and spas.
We want people to have an understanding and some get the experience of what it's like to be on a working farm and ranch.
You could call Platte River Fort a hotel, but it's more than that.
We're somewhere between a lodge, a bed and breakfast, a small resort.
Sitting on more than 200 acres of northern Colorado farmland,
We have a lot of hiking trails.
it's best to take a side-by-side to get to your room.
We're headed down to what we call Yurt Village.
Yurt tents line the riverbank, filled with beds, pillows, chairs, and yes,
You
wine.
get to feel like you're camping and be in nature, have a nice fire at night, sit by the fire, and yet we kind of do everything for you.
And if a tent, even this tent, is still a little out of your comfort level, maybe a wagon is more your style.
It sleeps 4, it has a king-size bed and a set of bunk beds in it.
Platte River Fort is a working farm, but it also serves a purpose beyond what the land produces.
This creates a really unique opportunity for people to get a new perspective and see how other people that they think are different from themselves are actually a lot more alike.
The property is centered around a replica of Bent's Fort in La Junta, with rooms facing out towards the river.
This is some place to come and have an experience.
An experience that's sure to be an adventure. And you can stay in those yurts for the next couple of months. Once winter comes, they put them away until the spring. But that covered wagon has heating and air conditioning. You can stay in it year-round. In Greeley, I'm Mark Salinger, 9 News. If this looks more like a tour.
Okay, thank you for, I hope the volume was sufficient for trying to listen. I will go back to my presentation. Okay, so that's an example of an agritourism site in the USA. What they have tried to do is to create a certain ambience, right? If you notice, they have built, they've added on this ambience on top of the farm to make it somewhere where people would want to stay and experience. So I'm going to briefly go through some of these elements. All right, so if you're contemplating an attraction, right? Some of the things to consider: how do you infuse fun into your farm tour? What will your farm tour involve? Or how can you combine education in terms of information and entertainment? Think about what the visitor is going to do, what they will see, what they can touch, what they can smell, what they will hear, and what they will eat, right? Think of how you can appeal to all of their senses. You know, that is what makes a great attraction. You know, how do you transform your farm into covering all of these pulse points? How can you infuse heritage and culture? You know, how can you create a story around what it is that you are offering and link it to that place where you are, the culture and the heritage of the place where you are? And then how do you combine, how can maybe your farm be combined with other activities within the rural territory or community to become somewhat of an adventure, right? So these are some of the things to consider when developing your farm or rural location into an attraction. And then, you know, we spoke about the relevance of accommodation, the greater value that you can earn or that stays within the community when you have accommodation. So you may not necessarily have the facilities for bread and breakfast, or you may not have a charming little French gîte, but you can improvise. You could have tents, for example. You know, the video that we just saw, they had different types of tents. So you can think creatively if you want to include accommodation as part of your offering, how you can do so, you know, and still make it relate to what it is that is around you. And you could maybe offer it as a camping site and so forth. And then if you're using your own residence, you know, how do you make your residence available to visitors? What are the things that you need to consider? And you know, I'm not certain how popular Airbnb is where you are. I don't know if somebody can comment on that.
There are a lot of Airbnbs here, actually.
Okay, so it has caught on, and it's pretty much everywhere. Hello?
Yes, I would definitely say so, because I was actually surprised to find out how many we have here.
Okay. So you see, Airbnb, the concept of Airbnb has already made it very possible, because it's not a foreign concept for someone now to come and stay in your house, right? Or it's not foreign for visitors to think about staying outside of hotels, right? That seed has been set with Airbnb, and it's a trend that we really have to build on. You know, that visitors are quite willing to find other types of accommodation. You know, they have become flexible, and I think it's for those of us who are looking at rural tourism opportunities to see how we can tap in. It may not necessarily be Airbnb, but just to realize that the trend has started, and you know, visitors have already bought into that concept. And then there's a culinary aspect, or gastronomy. Farms produce food, right? How can you incorporate dining, if needed, into your experience? And this is a quote from the World Tourism Organization Secretary General. With food so deeply connected to its origin, this focus allows destinations to market themselves as truly unique, appealing to those travelers who look to feel part of their destination through its flavors. And I'm also going to have to stop share and show you another video of a farm-to-table dining experience. But some elements to consider that, you know, food tourism has become a big trend worldwide. People will now travel for food as a main element of their tourism experience. Those types of travelers tend to be high net worth. They don't want sameness. They're looking for something different. It also should be authentic. It should reflect, there's a concept known as terroir. It should reflect the territory where the food is from, or where the site is located. And so also you have to consider how you can fuse traditional ways of preparing food with innovative ways of preparing food. So it really becomes unique. And then also, what is that story around the food that you are serving? What is the heritage of that food? What is the culture connected to that food? You know, you have to have a narrative around the food if you're going to link your farm experience to a dining experience. But that is a real option that you should consider. All right, so I'm going to stop share and bring up this video. All right, so the video that I'm about to show is from a farm to dining experience in Jamaica. This video was actually created by a cruise line. I think I'm not sure if it's Royal Caribbean. And it was part of a presentation made by one of the owners of this facility. And if you go on, say, TripAdvisor and look up, the name of the farm to dining experience is called Stush in the Bush. And it is in a very deep rural location in Jamaica. And if you go on their, like a TripAdvisor, they get 5-star rating. People travel from all over to come to their site. And it almost seems as if people have an out-of-body experience when they go there. So just to share another, realm of possibility, and this is more on the culinary side.
Jamaica's beauty is, I always say, it's really curvaceous. Winding and twisting and curving, and you're feeling all those curves. Your senses are going off. You're all excited. It's powerful, passionate love.
PG version.
It's a really nice place to visit.
Stush in the Bush really embodies this whole thought around rustic gourmet. The philosophy in itself is that we want you to learn how to fall in love with your food. It's not just about the food. It's about the entire experience.
It's been a rainy, windy morning. Zionite's farm at Stush in the Bush. What we're gonna do is to gather today's vegetables, greens, herbs, spices, fruits.
Parsley, cilantro, oregano. I'd like to make some fresh chimichurri sauce.
Whatever's gonna be on your menu, it's harvested fresh from the farm. I always describe Jamaica as a power center. There is a powerful energy just springing out of the earth. The connection with the earth is, I don't know, it's intrinsic for me. Oh. Breadfruit is a respect, it's a love, it's an appreciation, and it's also immediately you become a protector of that same earth.
Stush in the Bush is kind of the epitome of Chris and Lisa. The bushman, the Rasta, the down-to-earth with the shishi fufu, New York, Beijing, Brooklyn girl.
Working with my wife is a powerful experience. She will work from sunrise to sunset. She will work out everybody here, including me. Sometimes I have to hide, but that energy is what makes us do what we do and do it very well. I say we are the best at what we do because we are probably the only people doing exactly what we do. An experience where you can come into someone's home or someone's farm, dine with them, learning about the medicinal plants, you're learning about all different types of food, and I can guarantee you, the food you get here, you won't get anywhere else in Jamaica. That I know for sure. Good afternoon. How you doing? Blessed. People just dig a genuine experience. And for us, this is our home. And when we welcome you into our home, we welcome you like one of the family.
It's just who we are. It's what we do. It's what we put forth. Food is at the base of it. Why not have it be its very best?
Okay, guys, here we go.
And why not have it filled with pure love in it? It's a love for Jamaica, a love for the land, a love for great food, and being able to share that experience with other people. That's what you take in when you're at Stitch in the Bush.
First two ingredients on all our products, love and affection. Those are the first two ingredients, but I always assume that people know that. I don't even mention it. See, just like stout. If he hears the word love and just gets excited. Okay, boy. All right. Okay. Love you too. Yeah, man.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing this video and I'll go back to my presentation. Okay, so that is an example of farm-to-table dining. I will move on to the next element. Of course, now you have health and wellness. Think about that your farm can provide the ingredients for a spa experience. Think about your mints, your coconut oil, your cocoa butter, lemongrass, you know, the various herbs and spices, ginger. You know, we could go on, and depending on where you are, you may have different types of ingredients or different types of things that you grow that can contribute to having a type of health and wellness experience on your farm or rural location. Bear in mind that there's a concept of well-being, and well-being can connect to spiritual mindfulness, peace and quiet, and nature. And so the rural environment becomes a perfect place in which you can have a health and wellness experience. And you know, the other day I was speaking with someone who was thinking about doing some type of spa type experience relating to a particular product that they wanted to grow. And they were looking for, and it's in a rural area, and they were trying to find a river type location because in their mind, you know, they know about the hotels that have a spa and it's close to the beach and so forth. And I say, you know, you really have to think out of the box. You know, don't necessarily think like you're replicating how the hotels do it. You don't have to necessarily be close to water. You could think of a mountaintop or hillside retreat that has, you know, fantastic views. You know, so there are many ways in which your rural location, nature, your farm can be part of a health and wellness or spa type experience. So that's another element in terms of, you know, how can you customize your farm location into a rural tourism experience. And then, of course, it was mentioned in the presentation with Latin America, those agro-food routes. How can you be part of a route? How can you form a route? Who can you connect with? You know, in the area in which you are. Look around and see what others are doing, and you know, how can you, so it's not just your location, but you connect with other locations and you become part of a route that visitors can come to. So those are other ways in which you can build out the concept of developing tourism on your farm or rural location. All right, so some tips as to how you can develop and execute your idea if you're thinking about, agritourism or rural tourism. You have to look for some opportunities, some gaps that are not being filled. Think about creating something new, scan your environment for tourism possibilities, research the history, research the history connected to what you're thinking of, research the history of the area in which you are, understand the culture, become a specialist in that culture. You have to look at your quality, customer satisfaction, ensure that you deliver more than what the customer expects. You have to research the market. What is the market interested in, and what are the requirements for that market? What are the requirements for establishing a tourism site or attraction? Because one of the things with tourism is that it often comes with a lot of regulatory requirements. You might have to get certain licenses, certain permits. There's the issue of insurance that you have to consider, liability insurance, which is also very critical. So you have to look at what are the requirements that can enable you to offer tourism in your location. Also consider the suitability of your surrounding environment. If you're going to go into tourism, you also need to sensitize your community. You don't want your community sabotaging your tourism experience, right? And of course, you will need to get the requisite guidance, create partnerships, find the experts, speak to the experts, see who you can get help with from, so that you're not going on your own and you are, you're being guided along the way. And then of course, if you can test the market, if you develop a tourism experience or you have an accommodation, you can possibly contact one or two tour companies. Ask them if they can, invite them to your location for free, let them experience what it is you have to offer, get their feedback. And based on their feedback, you may adjust. And then of course, and this was, some of these elements, we would have recently, or we are still delivering a rural tourism course online. I saw one person in the chat mention that they were part of that course. And we had a guest lecture by a rural tourism operator. He actually specialized in nature tourism in Dominica. And one of the points that he stressed was safety, security, hygiene, right? Even if you're talking about going off the beaten track, people still want to feel safe, they want to feel secure, and they want to feel that the surroundings are clean and hygiene, right? So you have to take those things into consideration. How can you, dot all the I's and cross the T's? It's not something that you develop overnight, and it has to be very well thought through. So as I may have mentioned earlier, it's a lot more than just inviting people to come to a farm. There are a lot of elements that go into creating a product or a service when you're fusing agriculture and tourism. Any comments or questions? And moving towards the last two slides, or possibly I just take comments and questions at the end. And okay, I'm just going to show two examples of agritourism. This one is called PEG Farm in Barbados, and PEG stands for People, Environment and Growth, and it is referred to as a biodynamic farm, which essentially means that they look at what I would refer to as organic and regenerative agricultural practices. And so it is somewhat multidimensional. They have a cafe called Chrysalis Cafe, and they have a creative menu that is based on the food that is harvested from the farm. They do tours of the farm, and they also have a nature reserve, and they do educational programs you know, on that concept that they are promoting, the concept of a biodynamic farm. And really it is about healing, about the connection to the earth, you know. So it's a concept that weaves, you know, the agritourism, agro element with health and wellness, as well as with the culinary and dining, right? So that, I mean, I've provided the web link here, so you know, if you want to find out more about this particular site, but it's a unique way of combining, you know, farm tours, health and wellness, and a culinary experience. And also it's cited, I understand, in a very attractive location that is on a hilltop that looks over into the sea. So it's a relaxing environment. The next one that I would like to show is Belmont Estate in Grenada. And this is mainly a cocoa estate, but they have livestock and they do also herbs and spices. They receive hundreds, if not thousands of visitors each month. They are a main element of the Grenadian tourism experience. They have like, they do, you know, tours of the cocoa plantation, processing from cocoa to chocolate. They have a restaurant, a Grenadian restaurant on the property. Because of the scale of the operation, they employ over 80 people. You know, it is very instrumental in the community in which they operate. And they operate on the ethos that people are interested in good food. They're interested in a good experience and how those two connect, right? So that is Belmont Estate in Grenada. And so I will stop right here. I know this is a 2-hour session and we have, I think, another 15 minutes. So I welcome any questions or comments before we close. And I guess we can do it by a show of hands. And well, first of all, do any of the participants have an interest in agritourism? No hands raised, no questions or comments?
Yes, it's always something that I've thought of that I thought would be possible.
Oh, I see someone's hands raised. And Anja Fernand, you can go ahead. And I see that some, Anja, just before you go, I see some persons have indicated that in the chat that they have a question or a comment. So I'm gonna, or some, I don't know if it's a yes. I see some person say yes, yes. I realize that maybe they were answering the question that they asked, which is whether or not they're interested in agritourism.
The question of the agritourism.
I'm not sure who is speaking. Someone is speaking?
Yeah, Roxanne Maffrey here.
Okay, yes, Roxanne. Please go ahead. Anja, I see your hands raised, but I'll come to you after Roxanne.
Hi, thank you. I just had a comment for Cheryl earlier about the contracts for agriculture to the selling agricultural produce to the hotels. I would suggest that if they're not keen to give you a contract in the beginning, try it out anyway, demonstrate to them what you are able to do. If you're consistent, then you can use that as evidence to then negotiate a contract later down the line. And for the Belmont Estate, I'll try and find the Facebook. There was a podcast where the owner was on, and you know, she really encourages people to start small, because she said that even in the beginning, their restaurant, they would go and look for coconut branches, and it was a makeshift restaurant. I believe it was her. So I'll try and find the link for the group, but it was an interesting conversation. So even though you don't have all the infrastructure, the tourists are still understanding, and for them, it's also, they have respect for the innovation as well as the bigger picture and the process you're going through in building up your enterprise.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anja. Anyone else? As I said, I see persons saying, I know Roxanne was trying to speak. Do you want to speak now, Roxanne? Okay, I see, as I said, I've seen several persons say, yes, they are interested. Several persons say, yes, they're interested in agritourism. I would love to hear from one of these persons, you know, where their interest lies, you know, just to kind of start a brief conversation. Could any of those persons who indicated an interest, you know, raise their hands to speak? Or even to say why it is they would be interested in doing some type of agritourism venture? Ooh. Okay, I see Michaela. Michaela, could you go ahead, please? Michaela, you can unmute and speak.
Hello.
Yes, Michaela, we're hearing you.
Yes, I'm saying that agritourism, I believe, is something that's really interesting. It is something really intriguing. It is something that I really like. I'm not sure if I'm going to go into it, but it is something I'm looking at. But it is something that the communication, meeting the people, it is something different and interesting. And having heard from you, I believe it's something that is really good for our community or for our island as well.
Okay, thank you, Michaela. Do you think, I see someone else's hands raised, but Michaela, I just want to ask you a question. Based on what has been presented, how feasible do you think it is for, so for example, communities where you are to try a tourism experience?
I believe there is a lot, especially hiking. There is let us say cooking classes, maybe a tour, maybe exercise routine within that tour, maybe a bike riding or something like this, river hikes. There's a lot, I believe, that can be done there.
Okay, okay, thank you. All right, Talia. Okay, just before I go on to Talia, I just want to share that Anja, as she said, has posted the video that she mentioned in the chat. This is a video from the person from Belmont Estate. So if you want to watch it, you know, do copy and paste so that you can save that link. All right, Talia, could you go ahead, please?
Yes, hi, good night.
Good night.
For me, I always believe that the opportunities are always endless. For me, I had the idea that I could probably have something along the lines of like a planned sanitarium. But for me, I also wanted to incorporate other businesses, like somebody, probably if there are people who are tea enthusiasts, arts enthusiasts, so you know, the local foods, and it would just be a combination of different businesses where the guests could come and they would have different experiences from the island. That was my idea.
Okay. So the next question, several persons have indicated an interest that, you know, this is something that would be of interest to them. Is there anything that would prevent you, or is what would be the hurdle that you would need to jump over to get started?
Well, the location and the funds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe that probably sourcing the other individuals will not be too hard because there are many like-minded individuals who have businesses that are currently operating. So you'll be able to find, I guess, something that would, cohabit, everything will be together.
Okay, okay. And I know resource is always a challenge, but as was mentioned by Andrea earlier, as per the link she had shared, start small. Start small and build up, look at some low-hanging fruits, have a plan, an ABC as to, okay, what is the minimum type of experience or unit that I can start with, and then build around that.
Okay,
right?
thank you.
All right, I'm seeing someone in the chat mention that I am liability insurance is a hurdle. And that a lot of the big insurance companies are no longer offering insurance directly to tour operators, which I'm actually surprised because tour operators are established, so to speak. I would love to know why it is that they're not offering insurance to tour operators. I know, for example, when we had the guest lecture last week and the presenter spoke on the importance of liability insurance, and he also realized that insurance is a costly endeavor, and it is difficult for individual entities to get liability insurance. And he was suggesting mechanisms, and which maybe have to involve the government as to how they can group together smaller operators so that liability insurance becomes affordable. So group small operators are grouped under some kind of umbrella insurance. I see the person mentioning that the insurance company does not want to offer the insurance because of too many claims. So I'm not sure the nature of those claims, but that is something that really would be very interesting to explore. And that's another way in which small operators need to partner and collaborate so that things like liability insurance becomes feasible. So you as a small operator in and of yourself, you may not be able to afford liability insurance, but maybe if you are part of an association or a group, the group can afford the liability insurance. But these are the types of discussions that need to be had among groups to see what is possible. Okay, all right. I'm really following the trail of crumbs. We'll figure it out. I hope it's something that works out, because the thing about it is, if you don't offer insurance to tour companies, you have to kill the tourist product. It's a requirement for operating in the sector. So that's interesting, something that would need to be followed up on. Okay, any other questions or comments? I'm glad to hear that there is interest, and I do think it's something that has, we need to see more cases of agritourism and rural tourism diversifying our tourism product and allowing a lot more people to be part of tourism industry and differentiating what we consider to be tourism. Any other questions or comments? No one else?
In terms of insurance and so on, since the companies don't want to offer it, I think what farmers should start doing, like people would put aside something for a rainy day, is have their own sinking fund, like from their profits, put aside something in an account and forget it. So like if something does happen, they have something that they can help assist themselves. It may not be the full recovery amount, but they should create their own sinking fund from their profits monthly or whatever, put a sum aside in an account and forget it. So their own rainy day sinking fund. Maybe they should start doing that since they can't get insurance.
Well, as I said, a sinking fund is a kind of an interim idea, right? But ultimately, they are going to need insurance, because if there is a claim, if there is something that goes wrong and there is a claim, you could be talking about millions upon millions of dollars, in which a sinking fund might never reach, right? So yes, to cover yourself, you may put away for a rainy day, but at the same time, you really have to figure out how you are going to get to that point of being able to undertake insurance, whether by your own or in collaboration with other entities. Right, exactly. American lawsuits talking about millions and millions of dollars that a sinking fund is not going to be able to come anywhere close to, so it is worth trying to figure out how to be able to get the insurance. Okay, anybody else? All right, well, if we have no further questions or comments, I would like to hand over to the organizer from Helen's Daughters.
You're welcome, Miss Brandon.
I was saying I will let you take over.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much, Miss Brandon, for your presentation tonight and for your willingness to do this presentation for the women of Helen's Daughters. I think that they've learned a lot tonight, and I applaud you for your presentation as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you on behalf of Miss Carew.
Okay.
Yes,
but I mean, it's something I know Helen's Daughters is already involved in farm tours. So if it's something that if we know we need to have further dialogue on, if their members want to expand in this area, I am open for further dialogue with Helen's Daughters on the issue.
Okay, thank you for that. Miss Carew will definitely reach out to you if we want to take this further.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity to present to your team.
You're welcome. I have an announcement for the women before you leave. There is one announcement. So your final practical will be held on Sunday, the 17th of June. So you will be receiving more details of that practical session in the WhatsApp group. So please look out for that information. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone.
I think there's an error. 17th is on a Saturday, and the Sunday is the 18th.
I didn't get the full announcement because there was a break.
Oh, sorry. He said 17th is on a Sunday, but 17th is on a Saturday and 18th is on the Sunday.
The 17th for what, please?
17th of June.
The 17th is on a Saturday. You said Sunday 17th, but it's 18th.
Okay, I will bring that to the attention of Miss Carew, and we'll provide the accurate date for you in the WhatsApp group. To the person who did not hear the announcement, again, the final practical session will be held on the 18th of June. So please look out for more information in the WhatsApp group.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So Miss Brandon, if that is all, or ladies, do you have any other questions before we leave, or anything else you want to say before I end the session?
All went well for me. It was quick, but thank you.
Thanks so much for the session, Ms. Brandon.
Oh, I want to say great job, Ms. Brandon. Really enlightening.
I'm sure she would appreciate the fact that the chat is being filled with so many special thank you notes to her. So thank you, ladies, and have a good night. Thank you for your participation and your attendance.
Thank you. Good night.